I've driven the brand new Sierra. You can see that video here. I've driven the F-150 in various powertrain guises, including the EcoBoost, and I've driven the Ram, although I haven't driven their new diesel. And I can say very confidently, they're all very good trucks. Now the 2014 Toyota Tundra you see behind me here is no exception. So really it begs the question, why buy this particular truck if you need a full-size truck? I'm Greg Cavanaugh of the Gallup Journey magazine. This is my amateur car review channel, Gallup Journey Test Drives. Thanks for finding me here on YouTube. I hope I can answer that question for you, so stick around for the next few minutes. Many of you already know I'm kind of known for lengthy YouTube car reviews. This is not going to be one of those, so you can probably thank me already. I got a sick family at home, lots of needs to take care of, but let's crank this one out. So firstly, I need to say when it comes to exterior styling, this 2014 Tundra is largely just a refresh. Everything else, powertrain and everything, is basically the same except for this styling. Now, I'm going to go ahead and gripe right away because while I don't think this is necessarily a bad looking truck, and these headlamps really look pretty great actually, I'm just getting tired of this trend that we need to continually make the front grille larger and larger and larger to somehow come off with machismo, you know, or whatever. I just think they're gaudy and it's unnecessary. Frankly, the GMC Sierra I drove has a little bit more refined and tasteful exterior styling. I like that one better, although I will say this Tundra's not a terrible looking truck. I'm just getting a little tired of this. There's no doubt that full-size pickups are getting bigger and bigger. Something you'll notice about the Tundra though is that as a whole, this truck is bigger. Right? Let me explain by looking here at the bed. Now I'm slightly on a downhill here, so it's a little bit more exaggerated, but I'm 5'8". I mean, look at the height of this bed here. If you want to somehow reach down here and get in here, it's quite deep, which adds great cargo space, but man, it's hard to access. I found myself having to do this action all the time just to get things out of the bed of the truck. Now, that, like I said, it adds cargo capacity, which is great, especially since this is only a 5.5 foot bed because you're getting this CrewCab option here. But the reality is, it does make it a little less useful day to day. Another trend that I'm finding a little bit tiring is what's happening here. Look at the size of this CrewCab. Now you can't blame Toyota because everybody's doing this, but look at the size of this door. This door is bigger than the door in front of it. Now, why am I complaining about size? That's a valid question. I shouldn't be. It's super comfortable back here. Makes it very versatile for tools and anything else you want to use this for besides people. But look at the amount of space you see here. This is my driving position at 5'8". This is just, I mean, what do I do here, right? This is largely wasted space that I think could be better utilized with either a longer bed or a shorter wheelbase to make this thing more maneuverable. It's just not really a good use of space. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, super spacious and comfy. Can't complain about that. Now, compared to its competition, if you can see the video here, both the GMC and the Ford have flat load floors back here. This one has kind of this shelf here. Not a huge deal. You can still stack stuff up on here, but it isn't quite as versatile because of that. Also, with the GMC, you have slightly narrower seats that manage to kind of fold up a little bit closer to the back of the cab here, which makes a really great ingress and egress for any large tools, coolers, or anything big like that. Now, what this is great for is if you need to lock stuff in here, you know, tools, PA systems, bike gear, whatever you're into, this allows you to lock it and still use the bed for all the stuff that doesn't need to be locked or can be outside in the elements. So again, it does make it versatile, but I question whether it's the best use of space. This is definitely a nice feature on the Tundra I feel is necessary to highlight. People have asked me about it. They're not the only ones doing this, but man, is it just nice. Keeps this thing from flopping way down and so forth. Nice big bed back here in terms of width and height. Length, questionable if you want to put anything long in here, motorcycles, whatever. The 5.5 foot bed, I think, kind of compromises a little bit the versatility of a full-size truck. But if you need more cargo space for people and lockable gear, and the bed is also something you need, but not the main thing you need, it's a reasonable compromise, I suppose. Now I'm going to make the same claims for the interior that I do for the exterior. I don't see why we need to have this industry trend of moving towards macho design aesthetics. It's just not necessary. It's already a giant truck. So, now I've already complained, fairly frequently about the Toyota design aesthetic, particularly with the Sequoia and here in the Tundra with these giant dials, and it's good for practicality, but aesthetically speaking, it's really not that nice. Now they've added Tundra to the middle of the stack and SR5 in big letters here in the center armrest. I just don't really see it as that nice of a design aesthetic. Now, functionally speaking, and this is where the Toyota shines, and in my opinion, probably where it matters most, everything in here works great. It's easy to use, easy to reach, and that's where those big knobs and so forth, big buttons really come into play. And more importantly, there is storage galore in this thing. I mean, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there's 8 to 9 cup holders just here in the front, plus the cup holders for the rear seat. So, there's storage everywhere. You can lose so much stuff in here. Underneath the armrest is huge. It doesn't have quite all the connections that the Sierra has, which is, I'm sure, something they'll update in the future. But at this point, other than that kind of media functionality, everything else is top notch. So when I initially drove this Tundra off the lot, I thought to myself, man, I remember the 5.7 liter being a little more gutsy than this. Well, of course, my theory proved to be correct, that when I went and actually checked under the hood and looked at the window sticker, I was indeed driving the 4.6 liter. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say that's a demerit to this truck, but I kind of have a question I need to ask. Why bother? Now, the 4.6 liter makes 310 horsepower, 327 pound-feet of torque. Not terrible numbers, and it returns 14, 18, 16 in terms of EPA miles per gallon. Okay? Not terrible, but not great. Those miles per gallon in particular is an important note to make, but we'll get to that in a second. More importantly, you need to notice that the 4.6 liter really isn't much better in terms of fuel economy than the 5.7. It's really 1 mile per gallon difference across the EPA cycle. Now, when you're talking about a truck this big, what's more important? The power and torque you need for the truck to do its job, or that 1 mile per gallon? I'm going to go ahead and say the former, that power. And the 5.7 liter is a beast and makes considerably more horsepower than the 4.6 liter. So it really begs the question, other than price, why get the 4.6 liter? I will say though, it does make a good noise. Now, fuel economy as a whole for the Tundra is low. I mean, if you compare this 4.6 to GM's 6.2, the 6.2 actually gets better fuel economy than this 4.6. Now, maybe GM is somehow, I don't know, perfectly manipulating their EPA testing to get higher numbers, and the real world economy may say otherwise. But I can only go off the EPA ratings because I can't get a real world fuel economy measure that's accurate enough to quote for you guys on all these trucks I drive. So again, it begs the question, what's going on with Toyota's fuel economy, and should you buy the 4.6? When it comes to driving impressions, driving dynamics, the Tundra is quiet, it's smooth, it's well composed, it's a great riding truck. That makes it fairly versatile as a cross-country machine, and also just, doing your daily needs you need to do as a truck. I will say this though, in terms of the feel you get from driving the Tundra, to me, it feels bigger than its competition. And I say that not necessarily as a compliment. Yes, it's spacious here on the interior, but it also feels a little bit more clumsy and unwieldy, especially when you're driving it around town. Out here on the open road, especially in New Mexico, out here in the West, we got tons of space, not as big of a deal. But for those of you who are, urbanites and suburbanites, it definitely has a bigger feel to it than its competition. Now, technically speaking, the turning radius is a little bit better actually than some of its competition, but I did a little quick research and it turns out, yes, in this CrewCab 5.5-foot box configuration, it actually has a slightly longer wheelbase, up to 5 inches, depending on what you're comparing it to, and the overall length is a little bit longer, and it's also a little bit wider. You factor in these giant mirrors and so forth, and just the truck feels big. You have to plan ahead when you're pulling into parking lots and think to yourself, okay, am I going to be able to easily get in and out of that parking spot, or should I consider parking a little bit farther away just to make my life a little bit easier in the long run? So as a whole, of course it's a truck, it's going to feel big, but compared to its competition, it feels even bigger. So ultimately, when it boils down to it, the question was, why buy this truck, the 2014 Tundra? And I'm going to say it really boils down to two things, one tangible and one intangible. Let's start with the tangible, money. Now, it's really hard to cross-shop this truck online with its competition, just because you can build all these trucks in so many different ways, and their websites are also different. But I did my best to get an apples-to-apples comparison. And even with the smaller 4.6 here in this Tundra was, in the SR5 trim here, was a little bit more expensive by anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000, okay? So that is definitely a tangible difference. Even at 40 grand, people do cross-shop price, especially when these trucks as a whole are all quite good. Now let's talk intangibles, and you know where I'm going with this. Toyota is known, and it has a reputation, right, for its build quality, its durability, its dependability, and ultimately, I guess what probably matters to a lot of people is the resale value. Now, resale value is important because it's not always necessarily based in fact. If Toyota has a reputation and perception out there as being more reliable and being a better built truck, the resale value stays higher, and therefore, even if it's not necessarily true, it still works. So there's something to be said for that intangible benefit of buying a Toyota Tundra. I got to give a special thanks to Amigo Toyota of Gallup, New Mexico. As always, another great car dealership to work with. I can call the guys up, they hook me up with something to drive basically the same day, no problems. Great. Go see Jim if you guys need to get a Toyota. Now, a big thanks to you guys for liking, subscribing, sharing. I really appreciate all the comments. I seem to get quite a few positive comments, which is good because it keeps me doing this. You know, with a lot of stuff going on with my family and other things pulling me in different directions, those positive comments keep me motivated. So thanks for that. See you next time.